Sparks Butterfield, what is All God's Children about?
It started out as a story about a young man named Willie Bosket, who as a boy murdered a series of people on the subway in New York. And when I began to look into his record, I found that his father had also been convicted of murder. And then I found that his grandfather and great-grandfather had also been violent criminals. And eventually I traced the family back to a county in South Carolina, which has long been known to historians as being one of, or perhaps the most violent county in the country. So where I started out looking at one young boy in Harlem, I ended up really in a way with a history of violence in America, and it opened up a way to understand violence in a very different fashion than we normally do.
Welcome to another edition of The Morning Stretch. I'm your host, Tony Herbert, and thank you for tuning in again on this Sunday. The clip you just saw were of Willie Bostic, the first case of a juvenile being charged as an adult in the state of New York. In 1978, as a 15-year-old, Willie Bostic shot and killed two people, Noel Perez and Moises Perez, two victims unrelated in two separate incidents. Bostic pleaded guilty and was given the maximum sentence at the time for a minor of 5 years in prison, which basically caused then-Governor Hugh Carey to call for a special legislative session to pass the Juvenile Offender Act of 1978. Under this act, children as young as 13 years old can be tried in adult court for crimes such as murder and can receive the same penalties as an adult. New York State was the first to enact a law of this kind, and at the time, it led all the other states to pass similar legislation. This has been kind of like the law of New York for 40 years. Recently, it was just changed with legislation called Raise the Age. Here to discuss the implementation of Raise the Age and his union's role in effecting it is our first guest, and also I want to welcome back the president of the Corrections Officers Benevolent Association, Mr. Elias Hussamadeen.
Thanks, Tony.
So let's get right into it. And I'm going to throw a bevy of questions at you because I want to make sure we get the right information out. Where do you stand on this, and how does this Raise the Age thing affect you guys? Well,
first of all, we applaud the governor, state legislators for making New York now not one of the only two states that try juveniles as adults. We think that's good. I mean, but we don't think we have anything to do with it. It doesn't involve us. It involves other unions, other people who have traditionally been responsible for juveniles, juvenile delinquents, adolescents, whatever it is that you want to call them. As correction officers, we're responsible for adults. We're responsible for people who are charged and tried and arrested as adults.
But you guys were mentioned in the actual Raise the Age legislation. And basically raising the age discussed with you, was it discussed with you?
No, they never actually, no one ever discussed anything with us. I'm not even quite sure how it is that you can work a union into your legislation. No one discussed anything with us, and we were not a part of anything as far as this thing being happening or whatever. No.
Now, knowing that this is taking place, are you guys cooperating? Are you working with the city or the state or anybody along that vein?
At this moment, listen, initially, no one talked to COBA.
Right.
They talk to other unions, they talk to each other, agency, interagencies. Currently, since we started saying that we are not going to be involved, because my opinion as the president of the union is this is out of title work for us. Correction officers are law enforcement officers. We're not counselors, we're not mental health workers, we're not psychiatrists, any of those type of things. We are law enforcement officers. It's our job to enforce the law. The other thing is we work for the city of New York. We don't work for the state of New York. So as of October 1st, first of all, they have to have these 16 and 17-year-olds off of Rikers Island by October 1st. As of October 1st, this particular population will no longer be considered adults. They're going to be considered
adolescents.
Juveniles. So they're going to be turned over to ACS, the Administration of Children's Services, which basically runs the facility that they're supposed to be taken to, Horizon in the Bronx and Crossroads in Brooklyn. That has nothing to do with us. We are responsible for correction facilities. We are responsible for people who are in custody of correction facilities. So I have said publicly to the city council, to the mayor, to everyone that correction officers will not be involved.
And I'm going to read a quote here, and I want to ask that question because you sound strong and adamant that that's not going to be happening. But here it is, the Commissioner of the Department of Corrections, Cynthia Brand, whom I'm probably assuming you didn't get a chance to sit down and negotiate with either. She basically said in a recent statement that your members will be following those inmates that are in your custody now to these juvenile facilities. And my question is, did she even have a conversation with you if you're saying nobody spoke?
This is completely above Commissioner Brand's head.
Right.
This is City Hall.
So it's just politics.
This is exactly. This is, what do they call it, Mark J. This is the mayor. At the end of the day, this is what's going on. My union will not, my members will not be going to Horizon on Crossroads. And the only way that's going to happen is if a judge says to me, you're wrong. As it stands right now, it's out of title work. These jobs belong to other unions. They belong to Anthony Wells' union, the president of 371.
Right.
They belong to Greg Floyd's union, Local 237, Devania Powell, the United Probation. These are who deal with this population of people right now.
Right.
They deal with them right now, and they should continue to deal with them. And that is our position, and it's very public. I haven't hid it. It's not been hidden by me. My position on this has not. They've been trying to do direct dealing, which is another violation of the collective bargaining agreement, by making promises to my members. You're going to be able to work with adolescents and young people, which is not the case.
Now, has the mayor offered to sit down, and will you have discussion with him?
I've had discussions with his with City Hall and the deputy mayor and other people, but there's not a lot of discussion for me. Right. The fact of the matter is that as a correction officer, I signed on to be a correction officer, to work for the city of New York, to deal with adults, right, to be a law enforcement, the police of the jails, not someone who is responsible for sitting down and dealing with the mental hygiene of people of 16 and 17-year-olds or 13 and 14-year-olds as to what they are guilty of or what they've done to cause them to be in the system.
I want to take a look at this real quick. We're going to come back on the flip side of this.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Raise the age was so hard to do, and it was in the budget, and we had to get the budget done, that the legislative leaders basically gave up on it. And I literally brought in the legislators and put them around the table. I said, it's up to you to forge compromise and put your politics aside and figure out how to get to yes. And they sat there in that room, and they actually came up with a great program, which is the program I'm going to sign into law in a few minutes. That's the way elected officials are supposed to act. And that's what they did.
Over the next 2 years, most 16 and 17-year-olds accused of crimes will be treated as juveniles, not adult defendants. That means sending them to family court. And it also means new facilities that will keep them physically separate from inmates 18 and older. For local law enforcement, that's a big change.
This is going to be a lot of training for law enforcement. This is something that should really be integrated now into the police academies. Otherwise, we're going to have to be doing all kinds of retraining with our cops because, let's face it, this is something new.
Welcome back. As you know, I'm still here with a good friend, and I got to say this quite honestly, he's got a really tough job ahead of him. The president of COBA, Elias Hussein-Medina, is still here with us in the studio, and we talked about a few things and what have you. I guess my next question to you, it follows in sync with what we just saw with regards to the governor signing legislation, as well as the sheriff talking about the impact on training with regards to what has to take place, having these adolescents placed in these particular juvenile facilities. And we did elaborate with regards to the fact that the commissioner said that your members will be following these folks. Now, are they responsible for transportation to the facilities? And then what happens there?
Well, look, bottom line is they want my members to provide 3 services.
Right.
One is security, the other is escort, and the other is transport. The fact of the matter is these particular services are now currently being done in the Department of Juvenile Justice by other unions.
Right.
So why they're looking for us to do it, it's a little bit beyond me. And to top it off, the three things that they're looking for my members to be involved with are the three areas that will guarantee if there is a use of force, if there is violence. Those are the three areas that are guaranteed
If
to
they
be
want you to
involved.
conform to the Taylor law, which you guys do conform to, how is it they're going to flip the script and turn around and now take you out of your union structure to do something that that's not even written?
All roads lead to City Hall.
Right.
Basically, like one of the other union leaders said, the governor of the state of New York and the mayor of the city of New York have decided that they pretty much don't care who gets caught in the middle of whatever it is that they have going on. As I said in the beginning, I believe that to raise the age is a good law. I believe that it's proper, and I believe that it's actually time that they do it. But the reality is that you don't need correction officers to do this. You don't need correction officers to be a part of this policy. Again, and I'm being repetitious, we are not mental health workers.
Right.
It is not our job to sit down and evaluate.
But wait, it's good you say that, because here, and I read it time and time again, I'm looking at some excerpts, your members have been accused of mistreating, quote unquote, those 16 and 17-year-olds, correct? With excessive force. But somehow, you're mentioned in this new legislation as being part of the solution. How does that make sense?
Look, don't even get me started, Tony. The fact of the matter is, there's more than enough hypocrisy to go around. 4 or 5 years ago, they accused my members of having a fight club. They accused my members of abusing 16 and 17-year-olds. They accused my members of having abusing them. And the other thing is, they appointed an independent monitor because they said it was so bad. The Department of Justice attached themselves to everything. Now, 4 years later, they're using words like correction officers are the best equipped and the best qualified to do this transition. And I'm saying we're not being a part of it. That's hypocrisy. You don't need us. These are 16 and 17-year-olds. The deal is, even the people who now deal with juveniles have never dealt with this particular population,
Well, wouldn't that-
16 and 17-year-olds.
Wouldn't that cultural violence travel with them wherever they go?
Well, see, that's part of the argument of some people, some city council people, even some union people and some agency people are saying, if we take correction officers and move them along with the 16 and 17-year-olds, we're just transporting, like you said, this particular culture to a whole nother arena.
Right.
Listen, at the end of the day, that's for minds greater than ours to figure out. My guys are responsible for care, custody, and control of inmates who are charged as adult, who are treated as adult. At the city council, my testimony, and Tony Wells, we said to the city council and to the mayor, you need to push back this October 1st date because you're not going to be prepared. We're convinced they're not going to be prepared. They're convinced that they are.
Well, I'm informed that they haven't even started hiring. So they're way behind the gun on this, because I've got that information through some folks over at ACS. That process hasn't even started.
They haven't. They've also in the process of creating new titles, because if this is going to be done, then the other unions actually need an increase in the number of members that they have to actually perform this service. Look, I believe the intent is good, was good. I believe that what the language is the right thing to do. I just feel like if you're going to do it right. And that's the feeling of every other union that's involved. See, this is the one time that they have all of the unions. We're all on the same page. There's no problem between me and Anthony Wells. There's no problem between me and Delvina Powell. There's no problem between me and Greg. There's no problem between us. We're saying those are not our jobs. They're saying those are our jobs. And they want to be a part of making this thing work and making sure that it's done right. But because we're playing, again, because we're dealing and being caught between the state and the city and whatever it is that they have going on with each other, they're willing to sacrifice, let's just say the life or the safety of correction officers, of everybody else involved, even of the 16 to 17 year olds.
Does this mean that the civil service titles have to be changed if, in fact, that was to come into play?
They would probably, they're actually looking into creating a couple of other titles, but those titles are actually going to come under Local 371. They're going to come under Local 371. They want us to do these three things, Tony. And look, basically they're trying to take us from a correction facility setting into a juvenile setting that deals with not only 16 and 17-year-olds, but 13-year-olds,
14-year-olds.
12-year-olds.
And I've got to tell you, some very violent 13 and 14-year-olds. I've actually had to advocate for some of those members that you speak to, and I look forward to talking to Anthony Wells, because he and I have had some interaction with regards to that.
Well, before you cut me off, the other thing is, that's the other thing that have to be dealt with.
Right.
The 16 and 17-year-olds so far, from January of this year to now, have themselves been involved in more than 150 use of forces, assault, inmate-on-inmate fight. And these are issues. These are things that have to be addressed. And transitioning 16 and 17-year-olds over to the juvenile is more than just about a facility.
Right.
And the way the city and the state is treating this is like it's about a location.
Right.
As if you remove them from Rikers Island and take them to Brooklyn or the Bronx, somehow the culture is going to change, and it's not going to change. And the thing is, I'll say this and I'll stop. They can't have it both ways.
Right.
Over the last year, we've had city public school children killed, murdered in the school. I've never heard anyone blame the principal for that culture of violence that exists in the school. I've never heard anyone blame the teachers or, like you said, school safety for this culture of violence that exists in the New York City public school system. So as far as the culture of violence, as far as we're concerned, do I think we handle 16 and 17-year-olds? I think we do. I think we've done a hell of a job in protecting them from each other and helping them and guiding them. But it's now time for them to go. They're no longer our responsibility, and we shouldn't be involved in anything to do with them once they become juveniles.
What we're going to do at this time, I want to flip this over to this particular clip, and then we're going to come back with a colleague of yours so we can have further conversation.
You got it.
I want to thank Akeem Browder for having the courage to get up and tell the story over and over and over again and relive the pain. And it resonated with so many people all across this state, all across this country. And I don't believe we would be here today if you didn't have the courage and your family didn't have the courage to do what they did and reveal the atrocity of what happened to your brother. Akeem Browder.
My brother is Khalif Browder, as you all know. Khalif spent most of his remaining years of his life on Rikers Island, arrested at 16 years old for allegedly stealing a backpack. Khalif was in prison for 3 years. Much of his time was spent in solitary confinement, and the traumatizing years of going through that led to his inevitable death. Thanks to the leadership of New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo, we now have the Raise the Age bill passed, and on the age of criminal responsibility, he made a priority. Thank you.
Now, what you just saw was the clips with regards to what is the catalyst to why Raise the Age has been formulated. And a question for you. If, in fact, that the corrections officers do go over to these particular facilities, I should say, like Horizon and or Crossroads, would ACS come after them for use of force?
Well, see, the thing that a lot of people don't understand is that the use of force policy for juveniles is 100% different than what it is for adults. So in bringing us over, they're already in discussion of revising and creating an entirely new use of force policy. Right. Bringing us over for security, for escort transport, they don't want us to wear vests. In New York City correction facilities, we wear vests. They don't want us to have chemical agents. In the New York City jail system, we have chemical agents. They don't want us in transporting the 16 to 17-year-olds to have a weapon. Well, when we transport inmates throughout this city and throughout this state, we do so with weapons. So it's going to, again, expose my members to something that worse than what we already have now in the New York City jail system. So yeah, it's going to be different. They're trying to sell my members a bag of goods. The fact of the matter is, Tony, and I'll stop. Yes, there's going to be a difference. They even have in the juvenile justice system a thing called child abuse registry.
Exactly.
When juvenile counselors are involved in use of forces with juveniles,
They're charged.
They're charged, and even if they're found innocent, you're still
On that
you
registry.
still can be
Right.
on this child abuse registry.
And it hinders them from any possible job opportunities in the city again.
Yes, and it could be a problem with them with their own children, their own grandchildren.
Right.
So there's a lot that's going on, and there are a lot of reasons why correction officers should not be and will not be, unless a judge says so, a part of this transition.
That's information that a lot of folks don't know as to what's going on with regards to what's out here. Right now, joining us right here on the set is Dalvin K. Powell, president of the United Probation Officers Association. First and foremost, a lot of people don't know what probation officers are or what they do. Tell us a little bit about that.
So probation is the alternative to incarceration. It's instead of a person going to another alternative, right? So probation, instead of a person who comes through the criminal justice system, when people think of the criminal justice system, they think of police and corrections, and that's it. But then there's us who's in the middle. So when a person comes through the system and they're sentenced and convicted of a crime, whether it be a youth or an adult, they're placed on probation for a certain amount of time, and we provide services for them.
Oh, okay.
We provide services for them. We can have before raise the age, we can have somebody come in as young as 7, but I rarely saw it. The youngest I saw is 8.
What kind of services you guys render?
All right, so probation is the criminal justice scales, you see. We are literally the scales of justice. We provide counseling and services for them. We make referrals to them. We provide groups. We provide for adult and kids. We refer them out for different
like
services,
jobs
and
and stuff like that?
education.
What about housing? Is that
If need be,
okay.
provide them with housing or provide them with services for housing. Then on the other end, we're law enforcement. We are actually law enforcement. We fall under law enforcement. We carry weapons if need. We go out in the field. We have to make home visits, school visits.
Because they can be violated if they violate
Right.
probation.
But the probation's mindset is that one size does not fit all.
Okay.
So we deal with the individual. We deal with the individual. We create supervision plans to deal with the individual's needs and try to do our best to guide them in the right direction. We're considered the agents of change. I consider us gardeners because we plant seeds that in hopes that if not while on probation, at some point in their lives, those seeds will start to blossom and they'll make better choices in their life.
Interesting. So we've been having this conversation. How does raise the age affect your members?
Well, we've always, like I said, we're the alternative to incarceration. So we've always dealt with 16, 17-year-old, but on the adult side. Okay. So what's going to happen now with the raise of age, they're going to filter over to the family court side. Okay. And they'll be dealt with as youth, like the kids we dealt with before.
So you're in support of reason?
Yeah, I'm absolutely in support of it because
why so?
Because I don't believe that a young person, 16, 17-year-old, should be a part of the adult system. Like all of us, we're not who we was when we were 16 and 17 years old. So I think they should have the opportunity to be introduced to a different way of living, and our whole thing is about introducing them to make better choices. Excuse me. So no, I don't think the 16 and 17-year-olds should be subject to an adult service. I think they should be. To me, they're really more like in the middle.
Well, if
in the middle, there's something that should be in the middle, in my opinion, but they should definitely not be in the adult.
If there's one thing you wanted everybody out here to know about probation officers, what would that be?
There's a lot of things I want people to know. Probation.
Talk about it.
Probation. I'm gonna tell you from. I don't know if this is the place to say it, but because of probation officers and the work that we do, we save the city and the state billions of dollars. Because the monies that I don't know. I'm not into the statistics, but I know that the monies that they're saving the city and the state by keeping people in the community, right, with their families and giving them a second chance at life. That probation officers do a very good job in what we do, and I think it's an amazing component of the criminal justice system. One thing that needs to be understood that there's a body, and I was talking to you about it, right? There's a body within the criminal justice system, and we all have our own individual roles. We have the courts, we have the police department, we have the correction department, we have the probation department. And probation historically has been that piece of the puzzle that has always been forgotten. Okay. And we just don't supervise them. We do reports for the courts, for family court, and for adults. There's 2 parts. There's family court and adult. So we prepare investigation reports for the courts. These reports follow the individual throughout the system that people didn't know that people did not know about. There's another part to probation where a person gets sentenced to less than a year in jail, which could be on Rikers, and we can share that individual if that's the
Well, that's what I was going to ask. What would be you guys' interaction?
So our interaction in regard to that, all right, so a person can come through the system through the police department.
Right.
The person can go through, if we're talking through adult, the person goes through the system, they go through arraignment, at some point they got to come through corrections, right? Depends. Family court, on the other end of family court, the family court probation, they come through intake, and that supervisor makes a decision how that child is filtered out, okay? But I want to put a mark on something. The DJJ facilities, I have members in those facilities.
Okay.
They
DJJ being in the Department of
Juvenile Justice.
Right.
I wanted to highlight that. I have members in that facility in Horizon right now, and I have right now down to 2 probation officers because 1 got promoted, and I have a supervisor there. What's going to happen with these kind of programs, they're going to have to be expanded. And probation family court services in itself is going to have to be expanded because now we have to filter over those children into the family court system, right? There's going to be a family court part. There's going to be a special court part that's going to decide what kids go to adult. So it's not going to be totally, all of them will be going to adult. Some of them, the courts will decide who will be going to the adult system and who will be going into family court system. But for us, we're going to have to expand on our facilities.
Now, do you guys have the same concerns as both correction and these DJJ counselors with regards to use of force? How does that parlay into the work that you do?
We don't have those issues.
Okay.
We don't have.
Well, I mean, you have to violate somebody. Are they running from you?
You can have somebody that's gonna. I mean, to say, is it a? We have people on probation that do. They can get a warrant for not coming to probation, or they could. It gets to a point that somebody, it depends how a person gets violated because we're not punitive like that.
Okay.
We take all necessary precautions
to keep them out.
To keep them out. That's the whole purpose of probation, is to keep them out of jail and giving them a second chance at life. Probation is a second chance agency. So.
And see, I think probably the use of force would be different, or force would be different with her because of her relationship with them. Because we do have juvenile counselors who find themselves involved in use of force because of the fact that we are right here with them. And just to say this, Tony, that's the other reason, one of the other reasons why we're saying that it's not going to be ready on October 1st, because they still haven't even, listen to what she's saying, they still haven't even done what they're supposed to do as far as setting up the court system as to who's going to deal, where they're going to go, and all. They haven't. I mean, look, part of the other problem is if I'm 17 right now and I'm being moved to the juvenile center or detention center, and in 2 months I'm 18, guess what they're doing with me in 2 months? They're bringing me right back to Rikers Island. So again, this is not something that I believe that they totally thought out.
Right.
You know, it was just, let's beat the clock. Let's no longer be one of the 2 states that treat 16 to 17-year-old as adult. And then with the city part, okay, let's hurry up, let's do this. And they didn't think it through.
Well, the city has an issue with regards to, and let's go back to the analogy that you used with regards to the public school system. And whereas you have schools mixing seniors with elementary school kids, i.e. this would be the same thing with regards to 17-year-olds in jail with 13-year-olds.
Yes. Part of my understanding is that currently the 16 and 17-year-olds that we have right now that's going to transition over are not even going to be allowed to be mixed or to mingle with the new 16 and 17-year-olds coming in. So there's a lot that's wrong. See, this is what I said to City Hall. Who did this? Who thought this out? Because obviously you did not consult with the boots on the ground. If you were to consult with probation, if you were to consult with corrections, if you were to and I'm not talking about the commissioners of these agencies. I'm talking about the people who are actually going to be responsible for doing the work. They did not consult with me. They did not consult with her. They did not consult with Anthony. They didn't consult with Greg. When I met with Greg, it's like, we don't know. All roads point to City Hall.
Well, but some advocates would say that you guys, the unions, are the problem.
No.
And that you guys are hindering the implementation of Raise the Age.
Absolutely not. They just want to have a fall guy, and I'm not. And for me, and I can speak for my colleagues, I'm not going to take the fall for that. You know, like I said, I'm totally in support of the Raise the Age. Absolutely. Okay. So now that we're coming out, to me, this is punitive. Now that we're coming out, we testified at City Hall on April 18th, and when we was asked, was the unions a part of it, and we blatantly, and we said no. Now it's like, oh, okay, now we want to play hardball. No, we're not in the way of anything. It's just that when it gets done, it needs to be done right. Like I said before, it shouldn't be a Band-Aid. It needs to be, because this is a good time for juvenile justice reform, if it's done properly.
What would be the right way to do this?
Well, I have some recommendations, if you don't mind.
We're about information,
so one of the recommendations I thought about, and I talked to my members. Okay. So I did my homework, and I have, because let me tell you this, we have a program called ACE, right? Everybody Can Achieve, something like that.
ACE.
ACE. Okay. So we already deal with 16 and 24-year-old, and remember, I think Mayor Bloomberg had a program before. So we have a specific group of officers that deal with 16 and 24-year-olds. So there's things that they do already that's proven to be successful. So I did speak to one of my members, and one of the recommendations, but they have stuff like groups and different, programs that provide them with job readiness and educational readiness. So those kind of programs tend to work. And what happens when they have the groups, the other young adults, or then there'll be youth, right? They hold each other accountable. And they talk things through, and they get a chance to look at themselves, right? So that was one recommendation. Like I said, we would have to expand all our different facilities, especially our intake, because there's no way, like in DJJ, we will be able to deal with that volume, because this right now they have gotten stuck in the evening intake when after the police process.
You meaning the workers, your members?
Yeah, right, because they have to do the intake.
So when they get stuck,
and they have to
do overtime.
Right.
Okay.
That's another
conversation. See, a lot of people don't know that terminology. I'm learning.
Overtime is another conversation. We don't have unlimited. I'll come back for that one. So, and then we have the evening intake. We have the weekend intake, and then we have matter of fact, the union is the one that approved the DJJ facilities and the weekend arraignment, because to get these kids out of the system and back into the community with their families. Okay, so those programs, and like I said, in and of itself, is going to have to be totally expanded. Then something I recommended, the electronic monitoring, because of the fact that you might have some kids that shouldn't be locked up, but shouldn't be totally let loose, because we have curfews, because we do a curfew. We have officers who do curfew checks, round the clock, telephone calls. 16 and 17-year-old might be kind of hard to say be in the house by 8 o'clock, right? So one of my things I think it was a good idea is electronic monitoring, so we can keep a close eye on them, Right.
Your thoughts with regards to some ideas on implementing ways of making this thing happen a lot better?
Listen, while these inmates are in our custody currently, 16, 21-year-old, in the New York City Department of Corrections, we don't get a lot of credit for it.
Right.
But we already have programs. Okay. We already have programs such as helping and teaching them how to be carpenters, teaching them how to do sheetrock.
But nobody knows about that stuff. Why are they not? Why is that not being highlighted?
Well, I can't answer that, but I do know that we teach them how to be barbers, teach them how to be beauticians, help them get their food service license. There are hundreds of things that we do. And we have correction officers who are licensed mechanic, who are chefs. And we do all of this for 16 to 21 and older. So these are things that we already do. I guess it's not to anybody's advantage, because if you want to shut down Rikers Island, then the last thing you want to do is portray correction officers in a positive light. And this is what I've been saying as president of this union for the last 2 years. Don't make us the villain. Right. Don't turn around and say that we create a culture of violence when you're arresting 39 gang members for guns and weapons and rape and everything else, and you're sending them to us, and you're saying that we are creating this culture of violence. Nothing could be further from the truth. But just to answer your question, yes, we have programs. We are in favor of programs. We are not against reform.
How would you implement with your members?
How would I what?
Implement this whole process with your members.
It's not something that I have to implement. It's something that we already do.
You're doing.
Do it,
Okay.
right.
But again, then somebody's not getting the memo at City Hall. So is it still just politics?
It's politics. Basically, the state of New York want Rikers Island. They want this 420 acres, and they decided that the best way to get it is to make the New York City correction officer the bad guy, the villain. The reason why we have to shut down Rikers, the reason why we have to take $10.6 billion and build 4 new jails in the community, the reason why we have to make correction officers look like they're the reason why. It's politics.
And so raise the age basically is a premise derived from all of that stupidity.
I don't really know if it derives from all of that. I believe that there have been people, advocates on both sides of the aisle who've been fighting for raise the age for a long time, who've been fighting for the state of New York to stop being one of the 2 that didn't have it. So I'm not look, this is what I am sure of. New York City correction officers, we're not the problem. That's what I'm sure of. New York City correction officers, we contribute every day to the safety of this city as other unions. But again, this is about land. This is a land grab. They want the 420 acres. And the only one standing in between them and the 420 acres is COBA, correction officers, and that's it. So of course they're going to come out with all type of articles and documents and all of all of this to say to the public, this is why we have to shut down the 9 jails on Rikers Island. And it wasn't me that said it. It was Judge Jonathan Littman that said, take the 4 jails and put them in the Black and Latino communities.
All right. Well, I can give you the last word. What do you think? Where do you think we go from here?
You know, want me to ask you a question?
Yes.
This whole thing with Rikers, if it's okay, is this supposed to be part of the criminal justice reform, or is it? I never quite understood, because you can't, realistically, I've been doing this for 31 years as a probation officer, I'm a supervisor. You can't, we have to look at the whole system. And no disrespect to no other agency, but we got to start from education all the way through. I've been on committees on education from the pipeline to the jailhouse, and I have spoken about this numerous times. I've seen people, when I used to work, I worked in adult and I worked in the family court. And I used to always sit in adult, and I used to be, why can't these kids pass the 10th grade? Then I got to family court, and I was like, aha, because not for nothing, but they're not getting what they need. I'm not saying everybody that comes to the criminal justice is being denied some kind of something academically, but they're not getting what they need. And when we, as the beauty of the probation department and what we do is that we get into that. We get deep into the essence of who that person is and what is it that they need in order to succeed, right? So we, on numerous occasions, had found out that I had talked to a child in wah, and I realized that they're not getting it. Why are you not getting it? So we send them for evaluations to determine what is it that they need to get what they, in order for them to be successful, and that's for adults too. So, and then we found stuff like mentoring programs like Arches, and we have AIM, we have JJI. Those kind of, even for adult services, we have people, we have had graduations at probation, you know, so people thinking like punitive, right? We're not punitive. We're about keeping them off the streets and never coming back. We don't want none of this to be a Band-Aid. You know, this is not a show. This is, and I get emotional, and I'm sorry, my people know me, because I take this very seriously, because this should not be a game, okay? I don't know your culture, just like you didn't know mine. When we talked downstairs, he was like, what? I didn't even know you share the same people. Because I told him, I said, you get them for 6 to 9 months on the split, and then we pick it up from there for the rest of 4.5 to 5. He didn't know that. I mean, we have people that committed manslaughters and rapists that do 10 years probation. You understand? People don't know that, you know, but as far as this whole thing, I just don't want it to be another game. Gotcha. And then the other thing is that we have to look at who the population is, who the leaders of these unions are. And you know what I'm talking about. Yes. And I'll say it, you know, I'm female color, he's a male of color, Anthony Wells is a male of color. Yes. Our members are people of color. The people that we're talking about, these kids we're talking about, are predominantly Latino and people of color. So it's like, you know, I just don't want it to be a game. I want it to be something that's going to be solid. And this, just for the record, I am totally totally in favor. I have no reasons to stop this from happening because there, by the grace of God, could be any of us and our children.
Which
You should get the last word.
I'm sorry, I'm a female.
Which is what COBA has been saying,
Right.
at least for the last 2 years, 4 years.
Right.
Why do you want to take 10.6 billion and spend it on them when they are in jail, after they go to jail,
Right.
as opposed to spending $10.6 billion before they go to jail?
Exactly.
How does that work? Why not take the 10.6 billion and create training programs in the community? Why not create vocational programs in the community? Why not, look, you have people, 60,000 people who are homeless. You have the mentally ill.
That's right.
And we're missing mental health facilities. We're missing training facilities. We're missing all of this stuff. And for whatever reason, someone has decided that we'll spend money on them after they're in jail, as opposed to before.
Well, I thank you guys for the dialogue. I mean, there's a whole lot of information we can share, and there's a bunch of things that we can talk about, and I hope to have you guys back.
Okay.
So thank you for joining us.
Thank you
and,
for having me.
We'll be back right with my rant right after this. Well, there you have it. I'd like to thank our guests, Dalvin E.K. Powell, President of the United Probation Officers Association, and Elias Hussamuddin, President of the Corrections Officers Benevolent Association, for a great conversation. While I think raise the age is a good idea, I don't think it's well thought out. I mean, really, how can we mix 13-year-olds with 17-year-olds in an environment that exudes violence? Recently, in February, at the Crossroads Youth Facility in the Brownsville section of Brooklyn, we had an administrator who had her head split open and jaw broken by one of these teens. Approximately 40% of the city's juvenile justice counselors that work there as well are out on IOJ, injury on the job. So time and time again, our corrections officers are being accused of a culture of violence, accused of committing violence and using unnecessary force against the very same 16 and 17-year-olds by these politicians, from the mayor all the way to the governor and everyone in between. Yet, these same politicians say corrections officers are better qualified with the 16 and 17-year-olds to work with them, but it's actually in the legislation. This is the double talk and hypocrisy we're sick of from politicians. While I'm for raise the age, it has to be done right. And like most things from Albany and City Hall recently, like NYCHA and closing Rikers, the people most impacted by the implementation were not consulted. For any of this to ever work, you have to consult and engage the real stakeholders. Everyone's got to be at the table. Hopefully they will get it. And you know what? Before I forget, happy Mother's Day.